Hey everyone, so I am here to answer your questions that you submitted to me about adoption. So I'm going to get started. Why and when did you consider adoption? Well, the reason that we considered adoption was sort of twofold. Number one, I had always wanted to adopt. It had always been in the back of my mind because when I grew up, my best friend had been adopted, and I kind of saw that whole process, that whole family dynamic. And then also my aunt, who's like a big sister to me, adopted internationally. And I saw that whole process work out and what a blessing it was. And so I always had a lot of respect for the whole adoption process. Now, we didn't discuss adoption right away. After we got married, we did try to conceive, but it didn't happen right away. So after a while, I said, why don't we take a break from trying to conceive and consider adoption possibly? And when I brought it up to my husband, he was extremely open, and we did research together, and we decided that that was the route that we wanted to go for that point, that time in our life. And so that's kind of how we got led to adoption. What kind of adoption did you decide to do and why? We decided to go with a domestic adoption. We were open to international or domestic adoption. We went with the domestic because we fell in love with the agency that we picked, that we ended up picking, and just based on our family, they encourage us to do domestic adoption. International adoption involves taking a trip to whatever country you're adopting the child from, and because of my husband's job, that would have been really difficult, and so we went with domestic because of that. But we were open to both. Both are beautiful processes, and they're very different, but both, I've seen both work out really great for different families that I know. How old was your child when you adopted him? Well, we were very fortunate. When we got picked by Jason's birth mother, she was still pregnant with him. She was 8 months along, so we got to be there for his birth. He had to stay in a bridge care home for 1 month after his birth, so we got to bring him home at 1 month, but we knew him from the second he was born, which I feel so blessed and grateful that we did. We got that experience. So how many months was Megan pregnant when we got picked by her? Like I said, she was 8 months pregnant. So I really feel like it was a huge blessing to be able to see Jason in her belly. I know that kind of sounds weird maybe, but to be able to see Jason, her carrying Jason just means a lot to me. I saved a picture of her, like holding her belly, and it just means so much to me. I treasure it. If the birth mom wants to choose the name of the baby, can she? Well, I suppose that in certain situations, yes, she could. In our situation, she did not. We did run by the names that we were considering. We ran those by her, and we all liked the name Jason. So it wasn't her choice, but we were respectful of her, whether or not she liked the name. Now, in some cases, the birth mother, when the baby comes out, can name the baby whatever she wants, unless the papers are immediately signed over to you. But I don't think that that happens in very many, if any, cases. Well, maybe it does. I don't know. But for us personally, she was allowed to pick whatever name she wanted, but she picked the name we wanted. And so, that it's kind of varies case by case. I can't say for sure what your experience would be like. But for us, we got to pick the name. We just made sure that she liked the name. We didn't want to pick a name that she didn't like. What was the most difficult part of the adoption process? That's a hard question because I'm not going to lie, there are a lot of difficult parts of the process. It's not a journey that is easy, but it is a journey that is so, so worth it. I think the hardest part was probably after Megan picked us and, waiting for her to give birth. And then the day that she did give birth, the hospital setting was extremely, how do I say this? It's extremely chaotic. It was a chaotic day because Megan's family was there, and they did not agree with the adoption process. So there was a lot of dysfunction, there was a lot of emotion, and I was at that time I was actually pregnant. I was a couple months pregnant with Jonah. So it was like, oh, it was very stressful. It was a very stressful period of time. So I would say that that was the most difficult part of the process for me. I still look back on it though with, happiness, even though it was a hugely difficult time in my life. Just because of, I keep adding on to this answer, but just because of how awesome Jason is and what a great result, now seeing it in hindsight, the result of that day, I can kind of look back at it and say, you know what, that was an awesome day, even though at the time it was extremely stressful. How long did it take since you started the adoption process until you took Jason home? Well, we started the adoption process and then we waited after our social worker approved our home to bring a child into it. We went into the books, as they call it, and we waited for 2 years for a birth mother to pick us. And then after that, it happened pretty quickly because when Megan picked us, she was 8 months pregnant. And so after that, Jason went into bridge care for a month and then we got to bring him home. So it was just a little over 2 years was our wait. And that's pretty typical. When I read other people's stories or I talk to other adoptive parents, it seems like, that seems to be a typical wait time around 2 years. Especially for a domestic adoption. It seems to be around that for a lot of different people. Of course, it can vary hugely, but that seems to be pretty typical. Why did Bridge Care have to have Jason for so long? Now, I don't consider the amount of time that Jason was in Bridge Care to be super long. At least now in hindsight, I don't, because it was only a month. Don't get me wrong, that month dragged on. It felt like forever at the time, but we had been waiting for 2 years to get picked by a birth mother. So, in hindsight, that was a very short period of time. And the reason that he stayed in Bridge Care for a month was because all of the paperwork was being finalized, and we had to have a court date scheduled in order for Megan to sign over her rights officially. So that was why he had to stay at Bridge Care for a month. And while he was there, we were allowed to visit him, and we did visit him very often. I can't remember if I said this in the beginning of the video, but if I'm looking down, it's because your questions are on my laptop, and so I have to look down to read them. I'm sure you probably assumed that, but I just wanted to clarify in case you're like, yeah, why does she keep looking down at her lap? Do you think a parent of an adopted child has the same feelings towards their kids as a biological parent does towards theirs? This was an excellent question. I think this is just, a very insightful question, and it's difficult for me to answer that because the truth of the matter is it's different. It's not the same. Is it less or is it better? Is it less than? Is it more than? No, it's not. It's the same amount of love. It's just different. The process was different, and the relationship has different dynamics. I love Jason with all of my heart and soul, and I want to do well by him. But he came from another woman, and so the bonding process was different. I bonded with him rather quickly, especially because I was there for his birth, and I got to hold him, very shortly after he was born. I feel so blessed to have been able to do that. I know a lot of adoptive parents don't. So the other thing is with Jason, I have this immense love and connection with him, but not only him, also Megan. And so that adds a whole different dynamic to it. The fact that I am, so connected and loved to not only Jason, but also his birth mother. And, oddly enough, I feel a connection to his birth father too, even though I've never met him and I may never meet him. I still feel a connection to him because that's part of Jason, And so I guess that, I don't know if I'm verbalizing my answer right, but I guess that's sort of the best way I can describe it, is that It is the same amount of love, it's just different, and we arrived at it in a different way. Do you ever think about adopting another kid or having another kid? No, I don't. I think I'm done because I feel like our family dynamic of 4, 5, including my dog, I always include my dog, so 5. I feel like we're complete. I feel like, I have 2 boys, they're best friends, and it's going very well for us. I don't envision a third child. I just think we're complete. And so I don't really consider adopting or getting pregnant again. What about Jason's birth father? Does he have contact the same as the birth mother, or does he get his own set of rights? Okay, so I think I kind of mentioned it, but Jason's birth father is not in the picture. As soon as he found out that Megan was pregnant, he kind of pieced out of the relationship. Megan did contact him, and she did inform him that she was putting Jason up for adoption, and he didn't want to have any part of it. Now, I'm not going to say, like, if he were to want to know us in any way, I'd be open to meeting him because I'm curious, honestly. And also with all of the adoption classes that we took prior to becoming adoptive parents, we learned that in order for a child to emotionally develop and in order for them to be very secure in themselves, it really helps for them to be able to know their biological parents, or at least, know things about them. So I definitely would be open in the future to meeting Jason's birth father or allowing Jason to know more about him or possibly meet him. Let's see. I want to adopt, but I have no idea where to start. Yes, I get this a lot, and I felt the same way. I had no idea where to start when I first decided that, adoption was the route that we were going to go. We were like swamped with all these different, questions and where do we start? I recommend you doing some research on adoption agencies in your area. If you're considering domestic adoption or even international, you want to have an agency in your area that you know and that you feel very comfortable with. What we did is we picked 3 agencies that we thought were possibilities, and we went into informational meetings on each of those agencies. And then from those meetings, we basically picked the agency that we ended up going with. And that was actually the final one that we went to an informational meeting on. And at that point, we were kind of exhausted because the first 2 didn't end up what we thought they were going to be. And so we were just like, okay, is that going to happen with this one too? But fortunately did not, and we didn't give up, and that 3rd agency ended up being a perfect fit for us. So I recommend that you research agencies in your area. If you Google adoption agencies in your area, I guarantee you most likely there will be a list that comes up, and you can kind of do your research on them. I suggest you go to an informational meeting. Normally they offer them for free, and just gather all the information you can. This is a long process. I don't want you to feel discouraged. I oftentimes did because it's not going as quickly as you want it to. My biggest tip is to just have faith and have patience. I know it's so hard, but good things will come from this. It's a long process, but something beautiful can come from it. Where did your child come from? Does your child have cultural or language problems? No, Jason does not have those problems as of now. He came from the same area in the United States that we did. He won't have any language problems most likely because we've had him since he's been 1 month old, so he's grown up, speaking with us and seems to be doing well. Culturally, he is 50% Hispanic, and then from his mother's 100% Hispanic, and then his birth father was a mixture of Polish and German American. So he has that, ethnicity, that mix of a past, and so we're definitely going to incorporate those things into his life. He's only 4 now, so we have only been able to do so much at this point, but definitely we will take that into consideration, that he has a little different of a mix than we do, and we'll try to incorporate the culture into our lives too, and I'm excited about that. I think that's cool. All right, guys, I think I answered everyone's questions. If I missed anything at all, please feel free to comment below and let me know. I can always do a part 2 to this video. Thank you so much for your questions. I thought you guys had great questions, and I'm more than happy to answer them because I know when I first started this process, I had so many questions. So I'm more than happy to answer your questions. So anyway, I hope that you guys have a great day. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it can be of use to you in some way. I will talk to you later.